Republican. So, all right, we're with Erin Covey of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. We're now going to talk about Pennsylvania 7, the Lehigh Valley based congressional district, which to me was the most fascinating Democratic primary in Pennsylvania and perhaps in the country. So, this district is represented by first time Republican Ryan Mackenzie, first term Republican Ryan Mackenzie, who also won his seat in 2024, defeating, I guess, Susan Wild was a three-term incumbent at that point. And he won with 50.5% of the vote, so even a little closer than Bresnahan. The district there is 39.5% Republican, 41% Democrat, 19.5% independent. And a note about my voter guidebook, I only count active voters. Trump took 51.1% of the vote there, so Mackenzie ran closer to President Trump. Shapiro got 55.3 a couple years before. The Democrats had a knockdown, drag it out primary, and Bob Brooks, the head of the Pennsylvania Firefighters Union, triumphed, probably a little bit easier than many people thought. And he'll go against Mackenzie. So give us your thoughts. Pennsylvania 7, please.
Yeah, so Pennsylvania 7th District is the definition of a 50-50 seat. It has swung between the two parties over the past several years. Trump narrowly won it in 2016. Then Joe Biden narrowly won it in 2020. Then Trump won it again in 2024. But this is guaranteed to have a competitive race, regardless of the national environment, regardless of who the nominees are, I would think. And Mackenzie, to your point, he's also a freshman Republican. He won this race after narrowly ousting Susan Wild last cycle. And he is in kind of a similar position to Bresnahan in that he's not very well known among the voters. He was a state rep in the region, and his mom was a state rep in the region as well. But, it's making that jump from the state legislator to Congress is tough. And so he has to do a little bit more extra work in defining himself. Of course, unlike Bresnahan, he's kept a pretty low profile. He doesn't have obvious issues that Democrats can hit him over other than like the kind of generalized, nationalized talking points that they have on the big, beautiful bill and his vote for that. But just by nature of this district, he's going to be in a tough race. So we have this one also rated as a toss-up. The Democratic primary, like you said, was quite interesting because this group that was linked to Republicans tried to meddle in it. They were attempting to try to block Brooks from winning the nomination, which I guess goes to show that Republicans viewed him as the strongest potential Democratic nominee within that race, which was effectively a four-way race between Bob Brooks, Ryan Mackenzie, a former DOJ prosecutor, Lamont McClure.
Ryan Crosswell.
Ryan Croswell, yes. Too many Ryans in this Lehigh Valley-based seat.
I agree.
Croswell, the former DOJ attorney, and then you had Carol Obando-Durstein, who was backed by Susan Wild, and Lamont McClure, who is the Northampton County executive. So I think this race, folks were expecting it to be closer than it was because of this kind of last-minute potential Republican meddling. But Brooks ended up winning by a pretty solid 20-point margin in that primary, which I think, is also an indication of his pretty broad support within the party. He was backed by Bernie Sanders. He was also backed by Shapiro. So he kind of managed to unite the progressive and more centrist wings of the party. Now,
Brooks a big spender in the race, too. He had a couple $1 million of outside money helping him.
That's
and
correct.
I think the other two candidates, even though Crosswell raised a lot of money, the other two, especially Obando, Durstein, and the McClure, became kind of bystanders in their own campaign because they were just kind of flushed away by all the outside money that came into the race.
That's correct. Brooks had a lot of folks on his side who wanted to make sure that he was the nominee. And as soon as this outside group started spending against him, the DCCC came in with a buy with Brooks to make sure that he would get through. So I don't think, talking to folks ahead of the primary, most Democrats thought that he was still going to win, but there was definitely some concern in the final few weeks. And, he had his own potential issues with primary voters that had come up over the past month. Some of it was dredged up Facebook comments.
He marries two women with the exact same name. I mean, that alone is just funky.
That is true.
Let alone the fact that he has a court judgment against him by his first mother-in-law involving the sale of her house to he and the first Mrs. Brooks. Again, it's just great fodder for people like you and I who like to chat about, competitive races.
Yeah.
And the DCCC, what I noted was they spent coordinated money in a primary to help Bob Brooks. The TV ad of Shapiro endorsing him, they ran again at the end, but the disclaimer was paid for by DCCC and Brooks for Congress. So you don't normally see that a lot in primaries, do you? The campaign committee spending coordinated money in a contested primary?
No, you don't. I mean, typically, at least the past several years, the DCCC has been pretty reluctant to openly take sides in Democratic primaries. Of course, they always have their preferences and their
I think I got
like
over that
moves
this year,
behind the
Aaron.
scenes,
I think
but they've
I think
gotten
they got
over
over.
it. Yeah, and so they had put Brooks on their red to blue candidate list, elevating him as their preferred candidate. And then, yes, they put money behind his campaign at the last minute, which, I think they faced a lot of backlash for some of their picks on that list when they announced it a couple of weeks ago. But this was the one race where there wasn't really any backlash because again, Brooks was backed by both the Bernie wing of the party and the centrist wing of the party. And so that was probably their safest play. But yes, he
Sure.
got a little bit of help from them at the end, which also, I think he had his fundraising was not as great as it could have been given the amount of support that he had from the national party. And so I think they also felt like they needed to boost his own spending.
I think easily his primary spending, when you count all the outside groups, was more than $2.5 million. So spent he and his group spent more than all the other three candidates combined. And me, one of the interesting things was shortly after the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, endorsed him, we got even more background on some of his foibles. And I wrote, given what's come out about Brooks, I wouldn't doubt that the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, would also want to endorse Bob Brooks because to me, he seems to be the most target rich potential candidate. The other three were kind of ideas: the Hispanic woman, the former Republican DOJ guy, the local county executive. Brooks is, I think more of an idea. So I think will be very well resourced, but also gives Mackenzie some things to play with. He's not as perhaps clean a nominee as Paige Cognetti is up in the 8th district. His
Yeah, I'm
seat,
curious what you think his biggest vulnerabilities are in the general.
well, I think his previous comments where he was sounding like more of a blue collar Republican on guns and some cultural issues, which he immediately renounced. Now I've seen the light. I think those are some issues. I think to me, bilking his first mother-in-law out of a house and having a court judgment about that. So it's not just an allegation, it's here's what the court said. I think that will haunt him. The other thing I would note is unlike Bresnahan, Ryan Mackenzie is a professional legislator. He's been around. This is not his second campaign like it is for Bresnahan. It's his, I don't know, seventh or something. So he knows how to put his team together. You noted that his mom was also a state rep. I always feel like I should note that Ryan was in the House first and then his mom
Yes, that's a good
one in
note.
a separate district. They didn't follow each other, which at the time I think was the only time that it happened, that mom came in a different district along with her son. So that's kind of an interesting story. It should be noted that this district, unlike the one we just talked about, the 8th, this district is within the Philadelphia media market. So it's much more expensive. Philadelphia is the, what, fourth or fifth largest media market in the country. The Lehigh Valley is off to itself. So it has its own radio market, its own newspaper market. It does have a regional cable TV system that focuses on that. But otherwise, you're buying Philadelphia TV. So it's just more expensive to prosecute a case here for both sides.
Absolutely. It's definitely more expensive. But I do think this is a must win seat for Democrats if they're going to take back the House. So I think
Is
there
this a
will be.
bellwether seat, Erin Covey? Is this what you're saying? This is a
Well,
bellwether seat for House Democrats?
I think Pennsylvania gets a lot of those bellwether seats as a state and both within the state with its individual districts. But yes, certainly. And also this is a race that will be called earlier on election night. So it will be a good bellwether for
It's gonna be
where the
called
tide
earlier because
is.
it's an East Coast
Because it's
state.
on the
We're
East
an East
Coast.
Coast state.
Yes.
We're not, waiting for the polls to close in, Alaska the next day. So I would agree with you that this is a bellwether district. If the Democrats don't take this seat, It's not going to be as good a night for them come November that it could be. If they do take this seat, I think it could, portend a better than expected night for them. At the beginning of the cycle, I didn't think this would be the hottest race to watch, but given what's already happened in the primary, it's already been a great movie in the primary, and we're just
Yeah.
starting. We're just starting the general. So you have the seat also rated as a toss-up. How many toss-up seats do you have rated in the country in the House, Aaron? Do you remember?
So we have 14 Republicans and 3 Democrats in the toss-up column right now. And to your point about this district, I think there was never a world in which this wasn't going to be a highly competitive race in this environment. Because if you look at our toss-up list, there aren't that many other Republicans who represent tougher seats in terms of the 2024 presidential margin. Trump only won this seat by a couple of points. This isn't a Trump 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 seat. This is a definition of a swing seat. And so I would think that this would be the sort of seat that in a midterm cycle that's favorable for Democrats, even if it's not a blue wave night, they should be able to win this sort of district. But of course, we'll see how the next several months play out for both Brooks and Mackenzie.
Well, just a reminder that in our Pennsylvania primary, in addition to all these congressional races, there were 3 Senate Republican incumbents who got tough challenges from different candidates. So that was the focus. And of course, they all won, but 4 House incumbents lost. So as I say, it's why we run campaigns, Aaron, right? So, okay, PA7 also is a toss